We are looking at the types of economic systems today. And so first we want to review by thinking about all the fundamental questions that go into economic systems. So those questions are: what needs to be produced? How are we going to produce it? And for whom are we producing these goods? So there are different types of economies that we're going to look at today. Traditional type of economy is the first type of economy. And the traditional economy is probably the type of economy that we have learned about for most of human history. Okay, this was practiced for hundreds of years, hundreds of even thousands of years. And this is where humans produce at a subsistence level. Subsistence means you make what you need. And there's little opportunity for economic advancement. People are farming since the days of agriculture, farming and producing on their own land for themselves with little left over for selling or trading. And any opportunity that they had was really just that. It was trade. This is also sometimes called a barter economy. Because of that, there wasn't a lot of movement. There was not a lot of movement in economic advancement, so you didn't have a lot of opportunity for selling and making a lot of money. Therefore, the economic status was inherited. So if they were born poor, people stayed poor. There was a small group, the aristocracy, that owned and controlled the factors of production. We saw this often in the feudalist society where lords were ruling over in this type of economy. One of the benefits, though, was that it was stable. There really was no change because there was no opportunity for change, no freedom, which sounds, that's obviously a negative. There's very little growth. There was a lot to stability because there were no expectations. If you don't have any expectations, you don't have any disappointment. So people generally were okay with it. It went on from one generation to the next. People were not knowledgeable of any other type of economy, so this is the economy that stayed for a long time, and it is called tradition. It was learned from grandparents, like I said, and passed down from generation to generation. The answers of production that we just saw before, what to produce, how to produce it, and for whom we're producing it, were all answered by tradition. Whatever the village or the community needed, that's what was produced. So that's the first type, traditional economy. And so we think about historically families on their farms raising cattle or working the land with their livestock and agriculture and taking care of their families and in their small villages. The second type is called command economy. This is when the government owns factors of production. You're being commanded to make something. All of the power rests within the hands of the government. They answer the questions of what, how, and for whom things are being produced. They distribute products equally among the citizens. When the government is deciding, they see no benefit in one group over another, so all groups are the same. Workers are expected to take pride in their country. That is a high nationalist connection. Some of the modern or more modern day examples that we would think of would be Cuba, North Korea, and the former Soviet Union were examples of the command economy. And oftentimes we think about the government systems that these countries represent, just really emphasize that you reference them as command economies and not name any of these countries as communism or socialism. The connection between government and an economic system is close. They're obviously intertwined, but there is a difference. You want to look at this specifically through the lens of economics. They're equal. This is the major benefit of a command economy, and they're mostly stable. There's little growth, however, little freedom, and it's wasteful. That's one of the things I didn't talk about in the last type of economy, is also wasteful because traditional economy is not allowing for people to use their talents. When we talk about that specialization in the last economic unit, it is therefore wasteful. The same can be said for command. If these countries are commanding people based on maybe tests or what they're determining the people need, they have not considered people's individual choice, preference, or talents, so that becomes wasteful. The next type of economic system that we're going to talk about is a market economy. And a market economy is when producers and consumers determine what, how, and for whom to produce. There's absolutely no government involvement in this type of system. Factors of production are privately owned. It's all government regulated, so all the governments, not government regulated, all company regulated. There's absolutely no government involved. There is entire freedom, growth, and it's very efficient to have this type of market economy. But the thing that I must point out is that no pure form of market economy has ever existed. So we in the United States talk about our market economy, but we are a mixed market economy. I'll talk about that in just a little bit. But we have no example on a large scale of a market economy ever purely existing. And there are reasons for that, why we haven't gotten to that point with people making all of those choices. There's a lot of question with all of this as to if it's possible and in what way it could be possible to get a type of economic system, a market economy where there's no government intervention. So again, we have a lack of equality. This is unstable because government regulation would create stability, so this is the opposite of that. Mixed economy is the last type, the fourth type of economic systems. And so this last type is a combination of the two economic systems. And so we have a market economy, but also this is going to have the choice of the consumer, but also the regulation from the government. And the mixed economy is what we have here in the United States. So mixed economy, consumers and producers answer economic questions. The goal of the producer is to make a profit. The goal of the consumer is to achieve the lowest price possible. There is a role of government when we talk about the mixed market economy. The role of the government is imposing some regulations. Some of these regulations might be how much tax will be on certain products. When we think about sewer systems and educational systems at large, the government decided a long time ago that they would intervene and provide some regulation for these things so that they weren't individually owned. It makes it more connective when we talk about, especially the sewer line is a great example because this connects, multiple people, and it goes from beyond county borders, beyond state lines and things like that, and is organized through government systems. These goods and services, like we said, are provided, and they regulate market activities to ensure stability, which is what we're ultimately looking for. It promotes competition, though. It doesn't ignore individual entrepreneurs. So if you want to start a business in the United States, you still have that opportunity to work with the market, with supply and demand, and you can make a lot of money. The profitability margin in the United States is very good. It's why it's one of the strongest economies in the world. But these are question marks here at the bottom because we're still having arguments, discussions about it, going back and forth. How much freedom do we have? Some people want more freedom for consumer choice and production, but others would rather have more stability. Sometimes those are seen as opposites. Can you have stability regulation from the government and still have freedom? Is there waste then in this situation? Is it equal? We hear a lot in politics about creating more of an equal society, and then very often and quickly when someone starts to talk about inequity, the lack of equality among economic systems or economic groups. The rich are so rich and they're staying rich. The poor are poor and they're staying poor. So how do we create a way to have mobility in our social classes through our economy? Is it available? Is it a lack of social issues? So all of these things become questions for our economy. Okay, characteristics of a market economy. Market economy is going to respond to demand. There are choices in front of consumers and producers that regulate the market. They will decide. Basically, the consumers can dictate how the market will grow with regard to most products. Okay, so factors such as demand, supply, competition, and price are all going to regulate the market. And that starts with consumers. If consumers stop buying a certain type of car, if that's for a social reason, maybe the consumer does not agree with that particular brand, they will start to affect the market. Okay, they might not do it intentionally, it might just be one person at a time, but when word spreads collectively, consumers can affect the market in drastic ways. And again, this is what we call the free market or free enterprise type of economy. A market economy is free enterprise or free market economy. They all mean the same thing. Yes, capitalism is the last term that we might also see here. So we talk about a capitalist society is also just another name for that type of economy. So in capitalism, a system in which private citizens own most of the factors of production and decide how to use them within the legislative limits or government regulations. Free enterprise, system in which individuals and businesses are allowed to compete for a profit with a minimum of government interference. All right, we're going to look at a couple of integral historical economists who have helped to develop these systems. Adam Smith is the first economist that we're going to talk about. He wrote the book The Wealth of Nations, and his idea was to act in self-interest. He said consumers will regulate the market. So he supported the idea of a market economy, and he believed in this thing, the invisible hand, the unseen force driving consumers and producers to accomplish their goal. He also is attributed to the concept of laissez-faire, which is French for leave alone, hands off, and said government should not attempt to regulate the economy in any way. This is Mr. Adam Smith. And so we see that image here of the hand, this invisible hand of, this would be regulation, sort of being left alone, rising above there for the people. And then we have Mr. Karl Marx. And Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto. It's mid-1800s when we hear from Marx. And he criticized the market economy and instead supported socialism, which was a form of government, mixing them here, but it was more supportive of a command economy and wanted government to be involved. He said that when you do that, you create more equality. He wanted to prevent the few from ruling the many, which we know historically during that period of time, talking French Revolution period of time, where the third estate was paying, tons of tax, and the first and second estates owned 99% of the land and only made up 3% of the entire country's population. So he was trying to work against that situation, against that few and many. So he believed that socialism would eventually lead to communism, which was more of an equal thought. And his theory was that if you remove competition, people will be motivated to work together. Unfortunately, it has not worked out, and the countries that have tried the command economy have failed. Seeing this idea that there's no need for government, it just did not work. There has not been really truly successful command economy. We will talk about China in class and talk about their specific situation and how their command economy is, or their economy has grown recently. Okay, and so that's the last of our introduction for today. We just reflecting on the U.S. mixed market economy, where we have some government intervention, trying constantly, going back and forth and finding that balance between government regulation and consumer choice. Make sure that you are taking notes on these videos, fill out the question at the end of the video, and make sure your vocab for video 8 is done.